Okay, so for page 86, we're going to be talking about two different things. First are two verbs that both have to do with asking things. And secondly, we'll talk about indirect objects. So for the two verbs, we have two verbs. One is pedir and the other is preguntar. So pedir means to ask for something. So if you're going to ask somebody to give you something. And the second, preguntar, means to ask a question. So now, when you ask someone to give you something, you're generally asking a question. However, not always. Sometimes you're giving a command. Please give me that. Right? That's not really a question. So, not always. And they are different. When I ask for something requires an object. Please give me, I can't just stop. Okay? So do you guys remember from 8th grade? Well, if you were here at Hanalani, it would have been 8th grade. But 8th or 9th grade English, where you talked a lot about transitive and intransitive sentences. Remember those? Remember what direct objects are and indirect objects? So a transitive sentence is one that requires an object. The verb in the sentence requires the use of an object in order to be a complete sentence. If it doesn't have an object, then it's incomplete. And that's what pedir is. So if I want to say, let's say I go up to the restaurant, McDonald's, and I'm going to order my food, and I'm going to ask my friend, what are you ordering? What are you going to ask for? Right? So that would be the verb pedir. I can say, ¿Qué pides? What are you ordering? And then his response is yo pido, I'm ordering, and then he has to say something. He can't just leave it with no object being ordered. That makes it a transitive verb. Preguntar is not always transitive. It can be intransitive. So for example, let's say I say something to you as a class, and you guys say, no entiendo, I don't understand. And I try to explain to you in Spanish what exactly I'm doing, and I'm asking a question. I can say, yo pregunto, I'm asking. Right? So I can leave it at that. I can just say, I'm asking. Pregunto. Now, it can be transitive, where you include an object. I'm asking a question, but it doesn't require the use of an object, whereas pedir does. So that's one of the important differences. Let's read what it has to say. Note the differences between these two verbs. The verb pedir means to ask for or to request, and noun usually follows this verb, which would be the object, which makes it transitive. Rosa pide un refresco en el restaurante. So Rosa asks for a drink, soda, in the restaurant. The verb preguntar means to ask or to inquire, and it usually is followed by the word sí. Normally, the word sí means yes, but that's with an accent. All right, this word does not have an accent. Sí without an accent on the I, so just S-I, is not the word yes, it means if. So that would naturally follow the word preguntar. Pregunto if, I'm asking if something. It could also come before an interrogative expression or a word. And we have that list of interrogative words. Donde, cuando, a donde, de donde, que, cuál. I can't remember anymore at the moment. But there's lots of question words that could come after the word preguntar. So I'm asking where, I'm asking when, I'm asking if, si. All of these normally, very often, come after the verb preguntar. Use this verb to report a question. So, let's look at their examples. ¿Puedo llamar al barbero? Can I? Puedo, from poder, which means to be able, and it's o, so first person singular. Puedo, may I, or can I, or am I able to? Puedo llamar, to call, al barbero. Can I call the barber? Rafael pregunta si puede llamar al barbero. So now it's reporting what the question was. So if what he said is una pregunta, a question, una pregunta, then when you want to say what the question was, you can say Rafael is asking. Rafael is asking, pregunta, si puede, if he can. Notice the verb poder changed from puedo when Rafael says it to puede when I'm saying what he said. Rafael pregunta si puede llamar al barbero, to call the barber. So the word si can come after pregunta. What about the next one? ¿Dónde está mi champú? And Rafael pregunta ¿dónde está su champú? So Rafael is asking, because remember the present tense conjugations of the present tense indicative conjugations of a verb can mean two different things at least. Pregunta can mean he asks from the verb preguntar, which means to ask, and pregunta is third person singular, so he, and then it's indicative, so that means it's doing it right now, he's indicating it, and it's present tense. So pregunta means he asks, but it could also be continuous, so translated as continuous. He is asking. Pregunta could mean he asks or he is asking. So Rafael is asking, where is his shampoo? Notice the word order is different than English. In English, we would say Rafael is asking or asks where his shampoo is, with the verb is at the end. However, they put it right after the question word, ¿dónde? So it's not ¿dónde su champú está? Where his shampoo is. In Spanish, it's different. It's ¿dónde está su champú? Where is his shampoo? The last one. ¿A qué hora es la cita? So, Rafael pregunta ¿a qué hora es la cita? Rafael is asking at what hour it is. All right. Does anybody have any questions about the difference between pedir and preguntar? Which one is which? Which one is to ask for something? Pedir. Good. And how do I say a question, as in the noun? Anybody catch that? Yes, pregunta. Very often, when you want to know what the noun of a verb is, so like a question, which is the noun of the verb to question, or food, which is the noun of the verb to eat, you take the actually food is not a good example, that's different. But very often what you'll do is you'll just have the third person singular verb. So él pregunta means he asks, but una pregunta means a question, even though pregunta is the same word. So very often you'll see that the nouns are like that. If you don't know the noun, but you know the verb, then you could just take a wild guess and hope you're right. So that's always a good thing to practice. This is a funny story about doing that, about guessing like that actually. My wife was reading a book about like French culture and about how hospitable they are and how they invite people over for meals and things like that. And the story is written by an American who went to France and stayed with somebody, like a foreign exchange student kind of thing. But she was an adult and stayed there and was telling about her experience. And one time she said something, she meant to say that she felt like the preservatives in the yogurt in France were a lot less. There was much fewer preservatives in her yogurt than there are in America. But when she tried to guess what the word for preservatives was in French, she accidentally said something else very inappropriate. And very awkward to say that it was in your yogurt. So sometimes you'll make those mistakes, but you just got to be okay with making those mistakes, laugh about it, and then learn from it. So And besides, the benefit of being super embarrassed is that you probably won't forget for the next time. So. All right. Let's go on to page 86. I'm sorry, to the second half of page 86 and talk about indirect objects. But I think we should do some review. So let's go to the board. Take a second. Wow, guys.
Nick.
Anson. Yeah, don't try to blame that on Nick. Why don't you just let him handle it, Anson? All right. So, objects, direct objects, indirect objects. What are these you speak of, Mr. Grafe? Let's go back to transitive and intransitive. If a verb is transitive, that means what? What does that mean? Does it or does it not require something? Okay, it does require an indirect object. Okay. And then what? Intransitive? Does not, right? Correct. Not required. Okay, we're going to change this from direct object to object because there is more than one kind of object. There's also direct objects and there's indirect objects. Somebody tell me, what is a direct object? What's a direct object? Somebody. I really like that. I'm oddly passionate about it. This is really fun. It's like a puzzle, guys. Anybody like Sudoku here? Nobody likes Sudoku? You like Sudoku? You know what Sudoku is? Nope. Wow, guys. You don't like challenging stuff? What about like word games, like Mad Gap, trying to figure things out? Yeah, right? This is just like that. It's just, you gotta understand the rules. Does anybody like algebra here? Okay, you like algebra? You like algebra? What do you guys like? You're like real nice. Okay, that's fair. I like sleeping. That's going to get you really far in life. Alright. A direct object is the object that receives an action. Okay, so if we have a verb, everybody knows what the verb is. The verb is the action. Let's say, Snow White ate. Okay? Does this verb, well, let's just break it down really simply. have Snow White, that's the subject. Ate is the verb, right? So is ate transitive or intransitive? Intransitive, because it does not require an object. Can it have an object? Yes. So at this point, ate now. Snow White, Sleeping Beauty ate the apple, right? Is it not? Oh no, she poked her finger. Yeah. I get it right. I got 2 objects, but one of these days I'll get one. Ate the apple. Alright, so the apple is the what? It's an object, but which one is it? Is it the subject? No. Is it the direct object? Or the indirect object? That's the question, right? Trying to figure out, is an object an indirect object or a direct object is one of the most confusing questions. But in my mind, it's really simple. So the direct object, write this down, and then you'll I before E, except after C, or as in A as in A, sees the action. Now, what the heck does the direct object receives the action mean? Let's compare it to the definition for an indirect object. Indirect object receives the, any guesses? Okay, so yes, the indirect object is the object that receives the direct object. Okay? So, in this example, what object is receiving the action? No, Snow White is doing the action. Which object receives the action in E? The apple. Right, so the apple is the direct object. Now, let's change this to a transitive sentence. The witch gave an apple. Where's the subject? The witch. She's a witch. I'm not a witch, I'm a wife. The witch. And what's the verb? Gave. Yes. Verb. And what is apple? The direct object. Why? Because it what? Receives the action. Exactly. Now, gave the apple to Snow White. Is Snow White the subject in this sentence? No, because she's not the one doing the action. She is not receiving.
David Yoshimura to the upper school office, please. David Yoshimura to the upper school office.
Okay, so Snow White is not receiving the action because the witch didn't give Snow White away, like a husband gives Snow away his daughter in marriage, right? The witch gave an apple to Snow White. Snow White receives the direct object. Does that make sense? All right, good. So the direct object receives the action, and the indirect object receives the direct object, which means that you could, in English, switch this around and say it another way. The witch gave Snow White. Uh-oh, is that the direct object? No. If you finish it like that, right? So even though these look the same at the beginning, the witch gave an apple, the witch gave Snow White. They look almost the same, except that in English, you can switch it so that there's 2 different word orders. You can do subject, verb, direct object, indirect object, or subject, verb, subject, verb, indirect object, direct object. You can go either way. Okay? In Spanish, no puede. You cannot. So, let's move and transition these thoughts into Spanish now. The pronouns, oh, you know what? Let's put one more thought. we say often, very often, this is the one we use. The witch gave Snow White an apple. But when we say the direct object, we can replace an apple with another word, right? The witch gave it to Snow White. Now, if the context is there, then we'll know that it refers to the apple. But what is it called? That word it. What is that? It's a what? You say pronoun? Yeah, that's what you said. Good. It's a pronoun. Alright, now, what if we, instead of saying Snow White, we said her? What is her? Gave it to her. What is her? Is that a what? It is a noun. What kind of noun?
Pronoun.
Pronoun. Good job. Alright. So these words are pronouns. They are words that refer to a noun that is understood because of the context. That's what we're learning today. The pronouns in Spanish for the indirect objects, because the pronouns for direct objects are different. They're going to be different words, like two different sets of words. And today we're looking at the indirect objects, pronouns, the words that we're going to use to refer to other objects when those objects are indirect objects, which are objects that what? Receive the action or receive the verb? I'm sorry, the direct object. Which one is indirect object? The indirect object receives the direct object. Good. Alright. So let's look at what it says. I'll leave that for now. In chapter 2, we learned that the direct object receives the action of the verb. Note the direct object in each of the following sentences. Recomiendas la peluquería nueva. So that sentence, recomiendas, which comes from the verb to recommend, and who is doing the action? Recomiendas, us. Think about your endings. The o, as, a, almost, ice, on. What's it? You. Good. So do you recommend? Do you recommend something? This is intransitive because the verb requires an object that is recommended. La peluquería nueva. The new parlor. The new salon. Alright, so do you recommend the new salon? The parlor, peluquería, is the direct object. So now we have a context. Parlor is the direct object. So if the person wants to say, yes, I recommend the parlor, they can say, yes, it, I recommend, or I recommend it. It being the direct object, because it's what's receiving the action of recommending, and it's a pronoun, it. It's not saying the parlor, I recommend the parlor. It's referring to the parlor, so it's a pronoun. So, what is their response in Spanish? Sí, la recomiendo. Can I erase this? Okay. Sí. Sorry. Accent, because if it doesn't have an accent, it means what? Good. Good. Sí. La recomiendo. Alright. Now, let's talk about this phrase because it might look familiar. Let's say that recomiendo ended in an A. Then you might think that this is a noun. The recommendation. Okay? Now, the word for recommendation is actually recomendación, but let's just pretend that you know that, right? Recomienda, you might think it is a noun because of the word la. So then you would think, well, it doesn't end in an A, it ended in an O, so this is a typo. It should say el recomiendo, the recommendation, because it's masculine, right? But it doesn't. It's not a typo because this word here, la, is not a oh my goodness, definite article. right? We have definite articles, which mean the word the. And those are masculine, feminine, singular, plural. El, los, la, las. There's the word la. That word la is not this word la. It's a indirect object. Indirect object pronoun. That's what this word is. If you look at the page, there are 6. Why are there 6? Because it's referring to something which could be first, second, or third person plural, singular, or plural. Okay? So what are those indirect object pronouns? Let's write it right here. We have indirect objects. Pronouns referring to the object that receives the direct object. Me, you, te, le, nos, os, and les. I'm sorry, I was getting a little confused here. This is not an indirect object pronoun. This is a direct object pronoun. La recommends it. So the indirect object refers to the object that is receiving the direct object. Another way of saying what an indirect object is that an indirect object answers to whom or for whom. Okay, an indirect object answers the questions to whom or for whom. So, to whom or for whom do you recommend it? You don't recommend it to it, you recommend it to your friend, right? So, la recomiendo means I recommend it, but then if you want to say I recommend it to you, that's the pronouns that these are for. To you, indirect object pronouns. Say, to me, I recommend it to myself. Le, him or her. Nos, to us. Os is to all y'all, and les is to them. Now again, le and les also is for usted. So it's the formal versions of he. I recommend it to you, formal, or you all. Okay, let's keep reading. The indirect object, however, tells to whom or for whom the action is performed. It's the object that receives the direct object. So, ¿nos recomiendas esta peluquería? So, do you recommend it to us? So the first question was, ¿recomiendas la peluquería? Do you recommend the new parlor? But we want to add the word recomiendas. Nos. Now the sentence means, do you recommend the parlor to us? Nos. Everyone following along with that? Okay. Si, les, why does it say les? Si, les recogieron esa peluquería. What does les mean? When he says, do you recommend it to us? And then the person responds, sí, yes, les recomiendo. What does les mean? Huh? It does mean them, but not in this sentence. Huh? No. It is this word, but remember, it's the usted form. Usted. Les is also usted, not just they. Okay. So in this case, he's saying to all of you, ustedes. ustedes, to this. The bottom it gives a note. The indirect object pronouns are the same as the direct object pronouns except in the third person. So, the indirect object pronouns are here. We have done this before, but let's write it down. The direct object pronouns afterward. So here are the direct object pronouns. Me, te, lo or la, if it's masculine or feminine. Los, las. Okay? These are the direct object pronouns. So if you look at the next page, it says at the top, in addition to third person usage, which is he or she for indirect objects, so over here, le is also used to refer to usted, one person, you, right? The form. When speaking to a teacher or to someone you must address by their title, señor, señorita, señora, doctor, profesor, any of those, and their last name. Le replaces te. So if you are saying to you, like to ask, let's see, let's look at this sentence. It says, le explico el problema. Señor Fuentes. So we have explico, which means it's the verb. It ends in O, and it means I explain. The problem, so that's the object receiving the action of explanation. I'm the subject, yo, and it's understood in parentheses, it's not in here because of conjugation. In Spanish, you don't have to include a separate word, right? So the verb tells you who the subject is. So it's kind of the subject nested. Explico. I am the subject, the verb is to explain. El problema is the direct object. So what is le? It's the indirect object pronoun because it answers to whom or for whom I am explaining the problem. Alright. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead and read page 87 on your own. That section, and then you can start on your homework. And if you want, you can work with each other if you want to work on homework together, and you can ask me questions.